Hey, divers, Alec Peirce, Scuba, another Sea Hunt Remembered issue episode. Hope you enjoy this. This is again about comic books. And the reason I spend so much time on comic books, as I've mentioned earlier in previous episodes, is that the comic books for many, many people were the link to Sea Hunt. They would see Sea Hunt on TV, and they saw the comic books in the comic book or the variety store, and the two went together. And the comic books are a big, big part of Sea Hunt. And as I've mentioned previously, the comic books were spread all over the world, all different languages. So we're going to talk about one of those today, about comic books that were produced in a non-North American country, a non-English country. Before I do that, though, I want to mention this book, great book, the one I was reading. This is called the Diving Almanac and Book of Records. Now, this is a fantastic book. You can see it's very, very thick. I don't know if it's out of print or not, but I know there's lots of issues around. If you go on Amazon or go looking for it, it's a great book. The Diving Almanac and Book of Records. It was from Poor Beagle Press. Just a fantastic book. Everything about diving, equipment, different areas of the world, and where to dive, and diving techniques. And of course, there's a large section on who's who, the people who have been big contributors to the sport of scuba diving, famous if you like. I don't know how famous they are because I'm in there, in the who's who, but there are lots of people that are famous in there. Don't laugh, Kevin. And I just thought I'd mention this because I was just reading in here about the section about my collection, the largest collection of Sea Hunt memorabilia by Alec Peirce up in Canada. And it talks about the thousands of items or hundreds of items I have, games and all kinds of equipment. And so there's a nice picture in there as well. And about the underwater car. It's a pretty neat book. You know, if you're able to get one of these, Diving Almanac and Book of Records, if you can get one of those printed, edited by Jeffrey Gallant, if you can get one of those, that'd be great, because you put this wherever you'd like to sit and read, and I guarantee if you're a scuba diver that you'll be able to look at this and find something in there every time you pick it up, okay? Don't spend all your time looking at my pages. That was a joke, by the way. Another, I thought while I was looking at that, I thought I'd pull this out too. Another article, again, about me. But I mentioned this, not so much, this is from Diver Magazine. This, by the way, Diver Magazine is the longest published diving magazine in the world. Since Skin Diver Magazine, a number of years, went out of print, Diver Magazine, printed in Vancouver, Canada, is now the longest continuously printed dive magazine in the world. Printed by a very good friend of mine and vintage diver, by the way, Phil Newton. And this particular issue from a little while ago had a two-page article about my collection as well, signed, and it talks. That's me, right there, and some of my equipment and some of the people that were stars: Larry Hagman, Ted Knight, Robert Conrad, Bo Bridges, Zale Perry, Jack Nicholson, Leonard Nimoy. There's a lot of the famous people who were nobodies when Lloyd Bridges invited them to be part of the famous Sea Hunt show. But there's a two-page article, and nice pictures as well, if you're able to get a hold of that issue. But let's go on and I'll take a look at these comic books from around the world. And today I want to specifically look at comic books from Germany. That's right. For some reason, I mean, I can't explain it other than the fact that Sea Hunt was a fantastic show. I don't really understand the German mentality, although my mother was second-generation German, but I don't understand it. But these comic books are from Germany. Now, how do I know they're from Germany? Well, there's a real simple clue. They're written in German. Yeah. It does say so inside, of course, on the publishing page. It indicates where they were printed in Berlin and so on. And you can see that these cover pictures are exactly the same cover pictures that were on the famous 13 Sea Hunt issues that were published here in North America. Same pictures. Now, that means a couple of things. It means, first of all, that these pictures were authorized because these pictures were owned by Ziv Productions, the owner of Sea Hunt. So they must have been authorized by Ziv Productions to use these pictures and to use the stories as well, because the stories in here are the same stories. If you take a look at the right issue from the American one, you'll find that the pictures and the stories on the inside are exactly the same. Now, a little bit like the Spanish language Sea Hunt comics that I showed you a little while ago, a lot of it's identical to what was printed here in North America, but some items are different. On the back, on most of these, you will see one of those picture stories, a series of pictures, and it tells a story. Very, very common, and these are all the same as on the North American comics. The picture on the front's the same. Furnish Abenture. Interesting enough, They don't call this a Sea Hunt comic. It's called a Mike Nelson comic. Now, I don't know why they do that. I don't know if Sea Hunt doesn't translate well in the German. Maybe you know. And maybe they couldn't get licensing rights to use Sea Hunt. Seems rather strange they got all the licensing rights for this. And maybe Mike Nelson was a, I don't know. But these comic books are called Mike Nelson comic books. And they're numbered. This is number 29. That's German. 29. Yeah. And they're all numbered. And maybe you folks, if some of you are avid comic book collectors and you have an interest in German comic books, you can find out if there are any missing from my collection. I don't think there are. These were actually given to me, sold to me, by a very good friend of mine, a vintage diver and collector in Germany, and we have swapped things back and forth many, many times. I don't know if he'll be watching this episode. He knows his name, and he had a couple of sets of these in perfect condition. This one, for example, is nearly mint condition. Look at even the pages are still white. A little bit of yellowing on the edges, but not very much. But they're just fantastic. And then there are ads in these, as you know, in between. There's always an ad in here. So I can't read this, but I have to believe that these ads in here are directed at the German audience. I can't read anything in there, and I don't recognize the products either. But other than that, this is a genuine. There we go. What's this? Oh, this is. I think this is. I'm going to guess that this is an ad for other comics because it says. Rin Tin Tin, and I think this Peirce Abitur, I think that is the publisher perhaps, like Dell, I'm not too sure. But anyway, they're pretty interesting. There's a lot of them. And this is also kind of funny. So these first few, you see that's Sea Hunt, you recognize that. Mike Nelson, Sea Hunt, and the comic is called Mike Nelson. And there's Mike Nelson with that famous Morton gun. Maybe you, and some of you have been watching regularly. You remember the episode I had about the famous Morton gun. And it's so terribly, terribly rare, certainly in good operating condition. That's the gun that Mike Nelson is holding in this particular picture. There's another famous Mike Nelson picture from the comic books, and this one as well. I think all of you who have the Mike Nelson comics will recognize this picture of Mike Nelson holding his P4 mask and the Healthways gold gun. Another one. These are all the famous pictures of Mike Nelson on the Sea Hunt comic books. There you go, all the way through. And so there's those ones, and then the series continues. So there were 13 comics in North America, the original 13, but there's over 20 comics published in German. Now, here's where it gets interesting. All right, this is number 62. A German. This is number 62. Mike Nelson, right? Mike Nelson picture. Okay. This is number. This is the next number. The number's in black there. I can't quite see it. This is the next one. And here's the next one. And here's the next one. And then it goes for the next half a dozen or so. You see something different? Yeah. Well, you see, it's still got the same publisher, right? Same name, Mike Nelson. That's not Mike Nelson. That is not Mike Nelson. I'm going to take this out of here so Kevin can get in nice and close and see. Trust me when I tell you that that's not Mike Nelson. Right? Not only is that not Mike Nelson, that's not Mike Nelson's scuba gear. Mike Nelson almost invariably used Voigt scuba gear. Voigt was a very big company in the 60s, and some U.S. divers, a little bit of Healthways, he used a little mixture, but they were sponsors of Voigt. Lloyd Bridges was in ads for Voigt gear, and just as they do today, I'm sure Voigt supplied the equipment, so most of Mike Nelson's gear was Voigt. That is not a Voigt regulator, trust me. That's not a Voigt mask, and so on and so on. Now, this is all, I recognize some of it as being from Germany. Now, that makes sense. How did this happen? What happened here? I have no idea. No idea. They obviously still have the rights to produce the comics and use the name Mike Nelson, which is a fabricated name, right? That's the name of the star. The actor is Lloyd Bridges, the star is Mike. So they had all those rights. So I'm just guessing here. The only thing I can guess at is that they wanted more than the original 13 comics in Germany. They wanted more than that. Particularly popular, or for whatever reason, the distributor of the show, the publisher of these comic books, they wanted more. And there were no more. So somehow they got permission and went ahead and they produced more comics called Mike Nelson. And it's interesting. You see, here's another one, another example. Here's the next one. Mike Nelson. That's a German regulator and mask, German tank, German camera, everything. This is not original. And it's interesting because they still had the ads on the back. But what gets even more interesting is, where do the stories come from? There were only 13 original comic book stories. So they must have, as they went through this process, there's another one, as they went, and this lamp, I recognize this is a, I think it's Tabata lamp, and a German regulator. See, this is not our Mike Nelson, right? This is a Mike Nelson. There's a rubber raft, and I don't know who makes the boat and all that kind of stuff. And this one, I'm not sure what this says. Adventure underwater, maybe. He's got that Tabata lamp and all kinds of weird gauges. Let's take a peek in here, because this is well past number 13. And let's see what this story is in here. Well, there's a story in there, and they got police with guns and stuff like that, but I don't recognize the story, and it can't be one of the original 13 stories, because we're up to about number 18 or 19, or almost up to number 20 now. So where do these stories come from? They must have had somebody there at the publisher in Germany who was making up stories to continue the publication of these sea hunt related, right, Mike Nelson comics in German. Look at there. You see the differences? There's some real differences. And here's the last one. This is comic number 152. Now, you know, these numbers don't necessarily go in order. So this is number 141. This is number 152. That doesn't mean that there's 11 comics missing in between Mike Nelson comics. They'd be other comics. So there could have been, I'll make up names here, there could have been Lone Ranger, Cisco Kid, Rin Tin Tin, Lassie, all the comics that this company may have been producing. They numbered the comics as they were issued. They didn't number the specific name of the comics. So there's not 152 Sea Hunt comics. Is that clear? But anyway, 141, and this is number 152, which is the 20th comic using the name. And I can see the names changed again. Sturz in dem Abgrund. This looks like underwater to me. Not too sure in underground. Mike Nelson, you see it there? You see that, Kevin? Isn't this odd, huh? Mike Nelson is still in there. But where did this story come from, Kevin? Because there were only 13 original stories. We're up to number 20. One of these days, I have a very, very good friend, actually, who's also a vintage diver and a sea hunt collector, and he's German. I'm going to sit down one day with these German comics and go through it with him and look at the stories, and we'll compare them and see if I can't get a little more information. However, I wanted to share that with you folks, kind of interesting. Mike Nelson comics, Sea Hunt comics if you like, from Germany. In German, everything. The ads, everything is German. And there's a complete set in almost mint condition, part of my collection I'm sharing with you. Interesting. I hope you kind of enjoyed that and learned a little something. Maybe you have some insight. Maybe you have some German background and can help me a little bit with that. Keep the comments coming and the suggestions. I love it very much. So we'll talk to you again soon about Sea Hunt. Sea Hunt Remembered, Alec Peirce.